Hello, hello, hello. Give me a second while Discord updates. Wahaha. We're all here. We're ready to party. Just kidding. Welcome to tonight's episode. We are doing the Rawr of the Dinosaur, dealing with pop culture poisoning. We are joined by one star guest tonight, and younger. As much of a star as he's a regular. He gets to hang out with us. But with little to no introduction, let's introduce Amity. Amity, tell us about yourself. Who are you? What you do? What's your thing? Fill us in. Where can people find you? All that fun stuff.
Okay, everything. Got it. So my name is Amity. I run Amity Alexandra Jewelry Design, which sounds like, why am I here? Why am I here? So I make alternative custom fine jewelry. So any sort of idea or memory or passion that you might have, we can incorporate into the jewelry. We can remake your old inherited pieces that may have belonged to relatives or just anything you can imagine. And it's so much fun. And we're going to launch a sort of vintage Gothic Victorian inspired line very, very soon. So we'll have that plus custom. And I met Rook here from my podcast called The Gothic Heart, where we had him on talking all things cool about how you can do anything as long as you have a passion and turn it into your business. And so I wanted to come on here and see what all this was about. And here I am. You can find me amityalexandrajewelry.com and pretty much every social media at Amity Alexandra Jewelry. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Fantastic. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Like she mentioned, I was on her show, so if you like hearing my voice talk about fun things, we had a fantastic conversation over on the Gothic Heart. She is also much better at making clips out of videos of mine. If you just want the quick synopsis, go to her Instagram, and she has a whole bunch of really great videos and clips from her interviews from more than just me. So please go check that out in the future. In the meantime and in between time, let's get into the topic. Younger, how you want to run this? Do you want to ask questions today, or you want me to ask questions? Do you have anything prepped for this?
I think you should ask the question.
Okay, you pointed the wrong direction, but I'll take it. So with this, let's define what we're talking about. What is culture poisoning? Pretty simple. In your own words, when I say those words, what do they mean for you, Amity? What does culture poisoning bring up in your head when we first start talking about it?
Sure. So to me, it means sort of the mass media, mass, I don't know, just, I can't even think of the word, just like in our faces all the time of the same thing over and over and over to the point where it's not even interesting anymore. And I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I'm thinking about it. I mean, I actually have a topic in mind, or I mean, a subject in mind that I think of, but it's probably not going to be a very popular one. So
No,
we'll see
please.
what you guys come up with
Talk about
first.
shit. We're gonna cut on this. What's your thought here?
Well, just sort of in my head. Okay, and I love a lot of these movies, but I am starting to get sort of bombarded and over it, sort of the point of all of the sort of Marvel movies. I mean, I love the ones like can we just stop? Like we're remaking another movie every three years or something. And I love some of them. I was just re-showing my kids all the like original X-Men's from, like 2000 and stuff like that. And whew, I mean, I just feel like we need to move on. I'm sure it's not going to be very popular, but that was the first thing when I heard your topic that like just popped right into my head.
An interesting take on the word culture poisoning, which I totally agree with. It can totally be that for sure. Younger, what about you?
Oh man, so I might be getting into semi-deep, shady water here.
Uh oh.
But
That's where you
when
live.
you
I don't know what should.
when you go and you just like in certain, it can be like a actual physical locale related thing. Like you might live in a place that has a rich culture and history. Based off like the native heritage of that region, whatever that might be. And then just an influx of another. It can be literally through physical invasion of like there be a war going on and people go in places, and then the culture changing that way. An influx of displaced peoples. I wouldn't necessarily say poisoning, but whenever you have a big beef between a clash of cultures, essentially, whether it be physical or religion or just basic cultural differences, because people can form their whole identity focused around an individual aspect of a culture, right? And then any number of those could be taken to the far extremes. And so I think the moment people stop being tolerable of the other one is where that poisoning is going to start.
Interesting. Okay. I see where your head's at on that one. In all reality, what I was really focusing on is the slow decay of something that is been around for quite some time and slowly changing over time. A great example is goth became emo. We went from dark gothic clothing and things like that to bright highlighted hair and girls going, yay, rawr, my boyfriend says, you know what I mean? It became a whole cultural thing, right? But it didn't start like that. It started off as like one or two weirdos doing weirdo things, and then that became the culture over time, right? When we talk about it in the prospect of TTRPGs, there's a lot of old heads or the dinosaurs, right? That have a very set way. This is how you play a game. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what a TTRPG is. And they, especially recently, have been very head buddy with everyone that's coming in that's new. You know, there's been a lot of cultural stuff that has revamped the activity and the fun. And it is suffered from culture poisoning, right? Pop culture, all those important things. You know what I mean? The Marvel Heroes is a great example, right? Every movie now has to have an end credit scene. That wasn't a thing before, right? You went to the credits and you're like, all right, I don't need to watch these 10 minutes. We're good to go. Let's leave the theater. Now, if you leave the theater before the credits are over, you might miss that 30-second clip that tells you who the next big bad is, and it is terrible, right? So that's kind of the culture poisoning stuff that we're talking about. But I think both of you brought up some really, really fun things that I'm going to kind of key off of really quick. So back to Amity's superhero problems, as we will call it politely, right? When did you feel like this was noticeable for you? Because the thing about some poisons is they happen quickly and some happens very slow. In this segment or this thought with your opinions on the Marvel stuff, how long ago do you think it started becoming a poison? Because everything's a medicine until you have too much.
Yep. You know what? Probably about the time I stopped like seeing them in theaters every time they came out, right? At least for that particular series. You know what? Maybe it was about the time when this is so funny. Like I had not mine, but from my, I don't know, I guess growing up time, Spider-Man is the Kirsten Dunst, Tobey Maguire one. So I think it was about when they made another one and that was fine. And then they made one like only a couple years after that. And I was like, what is happening? I know we're in the other superhero world, but I think that was about the time where they all started to lose their power for me. And the reason I went exactly kind of there with like culture poisoning, with like just to me is just like mass bombarding of things, or pop culture poisoning, mass bombarding of things until they're just not interesting anymore, until you can mass bombard something else. If the pop hadn't been in there, I think I would have gone exactly where you went younger. I think like that would have been, and Rook, where yours tied in too, because we see that same shift happening, not just like you were saying in TTRPG, but we see that same shift happening at, I'll be brief, in sort of the jewelry world, or at least the diamond world. Natural mined diamonds aren't a thing anymore. Well, they are, but they're through the toilet. And so everything's lab grown diamonds and stones, and all of the generational jewelers won't even talk about them. They pretend they don't exist, and they're trying to still survive in this market. And so we sort of all separated from each other because we can't stand to not talk to each other. But I totally get what you're saying. Like they're like, nope, lab diamonds, they're fake. They're not real.
So that's really funny because we as a company use lab grown diamonds for some of our stuff, right? Because they are considerably cheaper, easier to make, and you can't tell the difference unless you look at them through a microscope, right?
No, even then, they're chemically identical. You have to buy like a very fancy machine to be able to tell the difference, and it's just because of the temperature in which they were grown. I mean, it's crazy.
Lab grown is just more perfect. They're just better. But they're not as valuable because nobody died for them or bled for them, so it's fine.
True story. But now, I mean, it just came out sort of yesterday. The De Beers owns all the big natural mined diamond in the mines, and the report, I mean, they're down. I mean, it's literally gone like this, like in the past few months. It's bad for mined diamonds out there. I mean, rightfully so. But so when you were talking about that with TRPG, I mean, we see it. We're constantly all butting heads. I mean, you can't even. One of the gem shows doesn't even allow lab grown gems to be sold there anymore. How does that help our clients, our customers, and what people actually want out there, and the people who are getting married right now? Gen Z, etc. Like, that's what they want. I don't know. It just boggles my mind. Like, Rook, you said it so well when you were on mine that you've got to adapt. You've got to keep changing. You've got to go with it and how it works, right?
Right.
Well, you just hit so many things for me right now. So it's I think you can tie that perfectly into, like, for instance, within the TTRPG world, Wizards of the Coast, the primary like the sole owner really of like D&D products, does not allow for AI generated artwork within their books. They specifically on the premise of it is designed to keep artists employed, so on and so forth, so that there is a human element added to it, and to creativity, and to promote that. And so I can understand there being like a balance between like utilizing the tools and completely banishing them, so on and so forth. But within the current community, I mean, I guess it was like almost last year now, there was a book that they released, is like Glory of Giants. And in the Glory of Giants, they had a primary artist create the basic image of the art itself. But then it was AI enhanced to like add additional textures to clothing and stuff. And then like Wizards did a whole recall on all the books, and they apologized, and then they had like people go in and hand edit the artwork, which for people like myself, I'm not a skilled artist. I do not have a skilled artist, so if I make a book, I might need to require the assistance of an AI tool, especially if I don't have the funding in order to hire an artist for. I don't know how much Wizards pays an artist to write one of their books, but I'm sure it's more than we make.
It's crazy how much of this overlaps. It's crazy because the same thing here. AI has been very controversial in the jewelry world too, but even not talking about that, AI is literally where it's going. It's improving. It's not going anywhere. If there's any business not willing to adapt or use it, they're going to fall to any business that is willing to. So I don't understand the hesitation.
Well, so I'm gonna counterpoint here because I am on your guys' boat, just for the record. But the thing people fear is the poisoning aspect, right? Using things too much. Speaking of AI art, the reason why you have to limit it somewhat is it starts to regress on itself. Because of how AI learning works, it learns from its own things, and there's so much AI produced stuff out there now that if it isn't quality controlled at all and just thrown out for things to learn from, it's just going to turn into a gobbledygook, and they're going to have to restart from the beginning kind of thing, right? We have stuff that can mimic great artists that have been dead for a very long time, or create beautiful masterpiece changing their design styles to hit something else, right? But if you do that enough times, you just get something that looks gloopy, gloppy, gross. And that's pretty much the case with any technology that you use, right? When it's overused, it goes bad, right? We're going back to the poisoning aspect of our conversation here, right? And not all, but most poisons start out as medicines, right? Even snake venom gets used as medicine from time to time, right? But too much of it and you're done, right? Same thing with like chemo and all that other fun stuff. That's just a poison used tactfully. But going into the kind of follow-up question or the statement with that one, right? Where do you see that old head pushback hitting the hardest? Like, is it new people that are trying to legitimize themselves, or is it people that have been there for a long time that aren't willing to change how they do things in your industry specifically?
In my industry specifically, it's actually both. So it's definitely the generational jewelers that, they've made their entire living on De Beers, "A diamond is forever." And that saying, right? And that's the only thing they know. They've got their glass cases, and you buy from the case, and the diamond is what's worth all the money. Well, guess what? The diamond's not worth all that much money anymore. And people don't have to go to glass cases. We've got online, and especially just like everything, computers started coming in colors, right? Things come in colors. People like to customize now. We don't want to just buy right out of the case. We want unique. We want different. We want to be able to put our memories or get a cool stone or something. I mean, engagement rings aren't all diamonds anymore or anything like that. So, and then the jewelers that are doing it like I am, what people want, what's fun, doing it differently. I am 100% disrupting the jewelry industry, especially because I'm going for high-end luxury, but it's being inclusive. It is meaningful. It has memories. It can be your style. We don't have to compromise your style and only get the same thing that Tiffany sells or Cartier sells or something like that. I will have, spiders, or I'm currently doing a custom. It's inspired. Okay. It's inspired. Uh, we've got some Iron Man arc reactor inspiration and some Darth Vader lightsaber inspiration in the set. It's so much fun, and we're doing in his band as well. We've got some arc reactor and lightsaber inspiration as well, and just things like that. And so they see people like us. We've been kicked out of groups, and it's not just me. There's a lot of jewelers like me out there. I mean, not necessarily the same style. That's not what I mean, but that will do custom and coming up, and we'll use lab things, etc. And they'll claim that that we can't talk about those things, and they'll kick us out of groups, and they're threatened. And then our generation, which I mean, the people up and coming like me, we share all of our resources. We don't have a problem with, hey, I, need help with this. Who's the best guy to find, tourmalated quartz from or something like that, right? Whereas all of that is super gatekeeping at the other generational level. And when they're not willing to adapt, and I mean, even if it's not art, right? I'm not talking necessarily AI art, but AI automating some things, right? Even just a chat window on your website, or even just a website in general, which a lot of them haven't had to have. Like, how long is that really going to last? And how long are people going to want to go into a store and pick out of the same, 100 rings that everybody else picks out of? So it's both ways.
That is awesome. That is.
I'm surprised we think
all the
quality is awesome.
Well, not to toot our own horns, but Epic Sages is very much forward into the future thinking, right? Carefully, cautiously, safely, but into the future we head.
Well, when I saw those skull dice, right? Those are my favorite.
So we got some new ones in, but they sold out except for one set of like brass ones. That's all we got left.
You say that they sell out every time. I need to just put them on a pendant.
Order it now while you're on the Cat podcast. Make your order.
Can't make my own. No, just kidding.
Do it. I mean,
no, it's your. It's
you know what?
Design,
I think that would be a great idea. Why don't we just make we have her make our custom die?
Yes, I like it.
Well, we threw around some random ideas just on supplies and things, but what I mean, the designs and everything. I mean, I don't know if it was just who exactly came up with it, but I found some of them so fascinating. And Rook even told me on my show that people buy them to make jewelry, and it just blew my mind and opened up like all these other new inspirations.
I was going to say, since we last talked, we actually started selling D20 necklaces that hold miniature tiny dice on the inside of them. And then,
because I was even thinking like, oh, sorry.
No, you're good. They have ones that are rings and that kind of stuff too. It's super cool.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like, why couldn't you put one in a ring and even have it like rolling? Like, why couldn't you put it? I mean, maybe they do that already, but I just think that would be. You always got one with you.
That's the thing for sure. I mean, on that note, like they have little tiny D20s or whatever. You could shake it. It'd be like one of those kids pop-up toys, more or less. You just shake it when you need it. All right, and then you can go. Heck, I mean, you could do a whole set, one for each finger. You're good to go. You got all the dice within one hand.
That does sound like the right amount of jewelry. I agree.
All right, so pushing forward with our topic, though. Let's talk about the effects of this culture poisoning, though. What are the effects it has? We'll start with negative, then go to positive, so we end up on high notes. But so, like, Younger, when you're looking at our TTRPG peers, right, the ones that have been around for a long time, and have that notion of it's more of a strategy board game compared to a role play centric system. When do you think you started seeing people shift over? Wait. This is an appropriate question for you. You've only been playing for 10 years. I don't know if you're old enough for this.
I've done my background history. I got the original 1974 edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, calm down.
Anyway, so in your opinion, where did it start kind of hitting in our current stuff? Where did the shift really hit?
So I would say, looking at the historical context of Dungeons and Dragons, 3rd edition and 3.5 was an explosion. It was the equivalency of like our version of AI, except instead of it being like AI, it was just an explosion of, if it could be anything fantasy related and you have any potential thought as to what the potential could be for this series of stuff, or like this creature like mating with these other creatures, there was half everything's. It was the most inclusive ever. It was like you had beholders having children with elves, and like those aren't even like humanoids. It was crazy. It just like everything intermingled with everything. And then like 4th edition was like, no, we're done. Not that. Whatever that was, no, we're not having it. Dumb it down, simplify it. We're just gonna do a massive, just narrow it down, cut off 90% of stuff. And now in 5th edition started off very basic, a little bit more than 4th. And then, like, it's been around, I don't know, it's been, like, came out in, like, 2015 or something, 5th edition did. And now it's, like, 2024, and we are having almost, like, a second reemergence of that same explosion of stuff. Except, you have the big corporation, they just took out, like, one of the most iconic races that has been around, I think, since the 2nd edition, which is, like, the half-elf, which has like its own independent culture and everything from all of the other groups and stuff that they have in the D&D world. And so it's been around like not the longest, because originally you could only choose like one of 3 races and it had to be associated with one of 3 classes. And so it's been around since the 2nd edition though, which is, I don't know, almost 50 years. And then they just cut it off. And it's even prominent in the new game that just came out, Baldur's Gate 3. The half-elf is in there. You know, it just shows how iconic it was. There's no other half races, I don't think, unless there's like half-orc.
Official ones, right.
And so it's a pretty wild sense of like, in the sense of like inclusivity, it has like the opposite effect, because now they're excluding it. You know, they're like, oh, well, like, half something is, you know, regarded as, like, potentially, like, racist or something like that. And it's like, well, isn't it kind of racist to remove the half thing? Like, that's literally segregation and deletion. You committed fantasy eugenics right there.
Well, I have a question.
That's
So
a
if
term. I like that. Anyway, go ahead.
If 3.5 was so, I mean, it sounded like it was super, super cool and you could do all of these things. How did people react to it?
Positively. Everyone loves 3.5.
4th edition is otherwise known as a failed 4th edition. It was reacted to terribly.
Okay.
The community as a whole was like, no, this is garbage. We had so many more options, and we're just going to stick with 3.5. And then they spent a bunch of money, wasted a bunch of time and effort on this failed 4th edition. Nobody talks about it. Nobody references it, because it's just a husk version of 3.5 and a worse version of 5e. And now they're, in my opinion, it might just be because I'm biased because I started on 5e, but now they're trying to make a husk of like one D&D or whatever. And it's like, it's basically just a trash version like 4E, in my opinion. Like, I read over it and I'm like, wow, if you're going to do this, it should, instead of it being a whole different edition, just make like, oh, here's the simple book, like the PHB. Like the PHB, if you want rules super simple, just only use the player's handbook. Don't use any of the other things. There's no reason to make a whole new a whole new shtick that sucks.
I mean, basically, it's becoming 5.5 because allegedly they backed off on a couple things on it, and have it'll integrate with everything that's come out for 5th edition. All the 5e compatible stuff that isn't owned by Wizards of the Coast that people have made and got licensed for and all that fun stuff will still work with it, essentially. They're just reworking a whole bunch of the cores and races and all that fun stuff and making everyone pay for all their online books again. And, incentivizing people to not buy the physical stuff, but to buy the digital only because then, can't own if you don't have. So, going to kind of to cut off and jump into this one, right? With this, let's talk about some more of the negative aspects though of this onset of things, right? The culture poisoning, right, of having everything online for all the old heads, which I will stand in the boomer corner on this one, is you don't own what you don't have, right? If you want to buy the 5e book on D&D Beyond to get all the cool things to make character creation super simple, have all the weapons, all that fun stuff, so you can just download an app and boom, your character's ready. That's great. But then you also have to buy it on Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, whatever VTT you decide to use if you use a VTT. If you want to hang out with your friends and play these games, they might not have access to those books and they're still playing with the old editions, right? And you have to get permissions to go through with that, right? It's such a haphazard way to go through with things. Whereas if you have a physical book that you bring to the table, be like, bam, here's the book that we can all look through. We don't all need to pay for an app or share one tiny little phone screen to go through and do all these things. Is kind of where things are at, right? From our side of things. Jumping over back to the jewelry, where do you think the negative aspect of switching over to these new ways of doing stuff, the using the AI more or the only using lab grown gems or that kind of stuff is kind of hitting?
I don't know if it really is a negative, or maybe I just always try to see the positive. But there can be a lot more extremely successful small jewelry businesses. Anyone could start now with AI and literally have all of the tools of a giant company through AI, a marketing team, a bench team, and use that stuff for their knowledge or how to create marketing campaigns or anything and compete with some of the big leagues. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do, right? So, I mean, I don't know. That's not necessarily a negative for me. I think there's room for everybody. Everyone has a different thing, but it's definitely going to be a negative for those big multi-million-dollar companies. They're going to have us on their heels in the next 5-10 years.
Which is all the more fun because that's what they call the invisible hand, right? And coming back to slap the old heads in the face. It's great. So, jumping over to the positives, right? Which is really honestly where I think all of our heads are at anyway, because that's the camp we're all happily in. What about some personal successes that you've had from these switchovers, right? You started in the new age, so it wasn't really a switchover from you, but I assume you learned from someone else. Was there a big benefit to how you do the things you do now, for you personally?
For me, right? Not younger.
Yes, for you. Yeah. I'll yell younger in a second.
Yes. I just think the big benefit is accessibility to all, right? So even I only got engaged or married 13 years ago. I 13 years, but still, relatively speaking, that's a short amount of time ago. And I couldn't get what I wanted for my Gothic Halloween wedding. We couldn't find the rings or the jewelry or anything. I mean, it wasn't available. It wasn't as accessible. Now, I think that's a great positive that people do not have to compromise their style based on what they can find. I mean, that's why I started sewing. Couldn't find clothes you wanted, or even why they started custom printing fabric. You can upload your designs and have it printed on fabric and then sew your clothes, right, for something you can't find out there. It's the same thing everywhere. The custom, that personal, not having to compromise what you believe in and what you want, just like Rook, when you were on my show, like you never compromised. You made a whole career out of it, right? Well, I spent years compromising my style as an attorney, as operations, and then here we are. So the accessibility is the greatest positive, that everybody is going to have more of a chance to be themselves, discover who they are, self-expression, And in turn, it's already happening. Things will become more acceptable. I was mentioning the other day to someone how still in Colorado, I live in Colorado, everyone has tattoos in Colorado and dogs. It's just what they do. But I worked in operations at a giant corporation. You weren't allowed to have tattoos. I can tell you everybody had tattoos and we even showed them. But how is that still a thing, right? Or you couldn't have different colored hair. So I think all of this accessibility and all of this ways of different companies that pop up to uber customize things. I mean, even you're listening to what people want in the dice that they want in jewelry, the necklace, etc. Right? The ability to listen and do what people want as what I feel is the great positive.
Interesting. Okay. Younger, jumping over to you. Similar question.
Similar question in the positive. See, I'm such a negative thinker. All I'm thinking about is all these bad things. So within the positive aspect, I mean, Amity really hit it off with the accessibility. You know, that is like anybody can go on and find a AI generation tool for whatever it is that they need assistance with, right? They're like, oh, like you're looking for like a music related one, you know, for an intro to your deal. And so, or us doing literally the same thing, you know, making a silly song. The beginning song that played before we did this was like great for what we were capable of, you know, doing at the beginning. What Rook has just posted in the chat is 100 times better than that. So like
same
the
lyrics.
fact of that it's like all like super affordable, you know, the affordability aspect of it, to be able to automize or sorry, that's the wrong word.
Itemize?
Right? Autonomize? I don't know.
Automate.
I spoke too fast.
Optimize.
Automate.
Oh, okay.
Automate.
I was way off. Sorry.
That's the word I'm looking for. All these different stuff, or me trying to like put like I need a visual descriptor for this creature I created or whatever, and it's like okay, great. I am a terrible artist. The stick figure I draw will look wrong. Okay, so an AI tool that I'm like, okay, I just need to click this button 50 times before I get something I actually want, and then I can go and be like, I know how to use PowerPoint. I'll edit it a little bit because I suck at Photoshop.
Hey, giving away company secrets over here. You gotta calm down.
The availability and just profound amount of resources that is being dumped into this from all sorts of tech angles that have kept it like affordable is, like you said, revolutionizing the market essentially. And it really helps out the small guys like ourselves. Who don't have that extra backing of, you know, we don't have a giant corporation who has like $50 million, you know, to just like go throw money to hire extra employees for the elements of the job that we might not be the most proficient at, you know, or you could even utilize it within researching tools to be able to like find like, hey, where do I actually need to go to improve this skill? So I think that's the most positivity you're going to get out of me.
All right. I was going to say, because the other thing it really does help, and we kind of talked about this earlier, is, you know, the clip making, right? We have our own clip machine. Like I tell everyone, I'm terrible at going through and clicking through them, but we do have them. They're there. They're made. I'm just, you know, got to edit and post them. But the amount of time it would take me to make those clips on my own without any assistance whatsoever would be days, right? We do 4-hour episodes when we do our show. It's like an hour a minute on editing. Yeah, I'd never be done with the first episode if that was the case. Which is funny because we did do our own edits on the first episode and gave up about 2 hours in because it was too much. If you guys go back and watch our original video, it sounds like squirrels talking because we had to condense how small it was. So we just increased the speed by like times 10. So we just sound stupid compared to what they look like now. They are considerably better and much more fun now. Same thing with our podcast stuff, you know, that's always getting better, or how screens are formatted and how things look, and yada yada yada, all that fun stuff, right? Jumping back into the question side of things. So we've got throughout the positives, the negatives, what the heck we're talking about, but let's talk about the availability and why culture poisoning happens, right? why is there always something that kind of just worms its way into something that is beloved by a lot of people, right? Again, I'm gonna go back to the Rawr, right, with the emo stuff comparatively to the gothic stuff. Gothic stuff had been around for half a century, if longer, right? Um, in a popular fashion sense before it started getting overtaken by 90s teens in their silly long socks. So like, how does that happen, right? In both personal experiences and the things that you've seen. Where is your head kind of at? This time I'm going to start with younger. How do you think it kind of comes about?
So there's only one thing guaranteed in life, and that is change. Change will always happen, whether it's a good change or a bad change. People as a whole don't want to continue to do the same thing. And so, like, as soon as the core elements of I have food, I have water, I have shelter are taken care of, even like within a household, like how many generations are you going to have your kid working as a blacksmith before one of your kids is like, you know what? I don't want to be a blacksmith. I want to be a wood carver. You know why? Because I think that's better. Like, I'm tired of my whole family being blacksmiths. I want to do something different. Da 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 da. Like, oh, we're 10 generations back of the men in our family all joined the army, and then one guy's like, well, you guys all suck. I want to join the Marines. Or whatever. There's just people don't want to just. You can want something yourself so much, but eventually there's just going to be somebody who wants to do something different. Whether that's in a negative light, or a positive light, whether they are intending on it being like adapting to changes, like, oh, new technology has emerged and now we're adapting to it and like trying to promote growth from it. Or it's an angsty teen who's like, I'm going to be a rebel. That's the system. Like, either way, there's going to be change. Yeah.
Interesting take. All right. Over to Amity.
I forgot the question.
Okay. So the question was, how do you think culture poisoning happens, either on a personal level or like a business level?
Yes. Okay. Well, I was so invested in what Younger was saying that I got off track.
He does that. It's great.
I almost just think, 100% with the change, whereas so many people try to resist change. I almost kind of enjoy it. I think it's a good time to learn and figure new things out and new strategies and things. But I almost think it's cyclical. Like, it's poisoning. You're tired of it until something else has taken over and it goes away. And then you almost get sometimes nostalgic or reminiscent, and it can come back in again. 30, 40, 50 years. I think it's sort of a cyclical thing.
Corduroy to come back.
It's just that's the way I see it. I mean, just like anything, a food you get tired, sick of, or that becomes that way. I do think eventually there'll be someone else who discovers it and be like, why haven't we done this? When it's no longer around, and then here we are again.
It's been done. You just didn't search long enough.
Yeah.
I saw a video the other day of things that Generation Alpha is discovering out of the blue, or not? Sorry, not Alpha. What's the one in between Millennial? The Zoomers, right?
Z. Yes, I was like, Alpha. That's my kid.
But they're discovering things like Tamagotchi and all the stuff that we had as kids, right? And they're just rebranding it, and these things are so cool. And it's like, that's what we grew up with. That we were there already. It happened. It faded a long time ago. It's not cool. It became lame. Leave it alone.
Tamagotchi is one of those things. We were just right, and then so it went out, and here we are. We're back.
That's a great example of culture poisoning, right? Because it was something that started in one place, and then everyone had one, right? And it became to the point where it was kind of like, right? It destroyed that culture because it was so prevalent. And we all let our poor little Tamagotchis die. They've been starving for 17 plus years now, and we're terrible people, but we don't want to talk about that. But that's a wonderful example, right? Is something that just, and it goes back to cyclical, right? That's a great way to think about it. That things just kind of cycle through. So kind of on that note, we'll kind of jump into the how we handle this, right? As either as individuals, or as a whole. We'll start with individuals. Like, how do you handle? I know we've kind of asked this question. We're kind of retreading the topic here, but how do you handle that spread when you see a trend coming out of nowhere? How do you adapt and get in front of it? Or do you step around it? Are there things in your business that you're like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole? Start with Amity.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you added that second part because I think it depends, right? If it's, I mean, first, got to be knowledgeable enough to realize if this is literally going to be world changing, industry changing, like AI has the very potential to be, right? Or whether it's just going to be a fast fad or a trend of something, right? So, on that note, for me, I would avoid, if it's a trend of, oh, nobody likes black diamonds, or people don't want alternative jewelry, or they don't like the macabre or the eerie. Well, God, who cares? I do, and I know a lot of people do, right? And that's my market, right? And I don't have to be everybody. They're just not going to be my customers. But like we're saying, anything that is literally world changing, like electricity and machinery were for back then, or like what we're looking at right now. I don't think you can survive if you don't jump on the train, however it might be applicable to your life, your business, anything. I mean, I even used it. I used some AI the other day just to help me write a thank you note to one of my kids' teachers, right? Just because I didn't want to have to sit there for half an hour coming up with the right words to sound good, right? I mean, it just makes sometimes, adapting to that can make our life easier.
An interesting use for sure. Hopefully, she doesn't watch this show later. Dun dun dun. Tattling right now. But I'm with you on that one. Younger, what about you? Where in your personal? Actually, sorry. Before we get to younger, Amity, do you have anything that you can think of now that you are trying to avoid in your business? That is something you won't touch with a 10-foot pole because it is trendy or unfashionable,
It's trendy or
or
unfashionable.
sorry,
Well,
infashionable, whatever you want to say.
yes. I won't touch with a 10-foot pole. Well, this isn't actually the case, but I would love to eventually get to a point where it's people not coming for custom just because they, need it to fit around their unique shape and they just want a plain band with some diamonds, right? Yes, that's the bread and butter, but it sort of kills you inspirationally and creatively, right? I would love to not have to touch those with a 10-foot pole eventually and be able to purely help people that could really, really benefit from what I do and my, past and history and how I can help them, and not just be, the kind of service that just anybody. I like to have that meaning and that story and that fun alternative, inspiration. So that would eventually be, I would love to do that, or be able to be like, hey, that's not really my thing, but hey, my coworker or, my colleague does this beautifully and that is her style, right? So that would be one day I would love to get there.
Interesting. Okay, Younger, jumping over to you.
Yes. Okay. So, can you rephrase the question real quick?
One more time. Yeah, so the question is, how do you handle personally things in your industry that are either something that is world changing or something that you won't touch with a 10-foot pole? Like, how do you handle both the good and the things that you're like, I'm not touching that because it's going to die in a month?
Okay. Start looking at it from the big perspective and then the small perspective.
Of course.
If I think one of the big important things is know if you can withstand the storm, Like, for instance, if you're a big corporation and you have had your fingers intermingled into the platform or whatever, like, group of what your business is, you might just simply have the power and political grab to be like, we have agreements with the government that nobody else can do what we are doing. Welcome to the world of rockets. Only we can build rockets. Okay? You're not allowed to build rockets, therefore I'm not worried about your little thing because we're going to buy you out next week. Or we're just going to have the government shut you down, or some third-party organization. You know, rather than it even be like oh, our rockets are better than yours. We'll just make it that you can't do it. You know, um, in the United States, we love saying that, like, oh, that's not a thing. Anybody can do anything. But we all know that people with big enough money love just shutting down other things, or, oh, we're going to have lots of lawyer fees and this and that. You know, he stole our idea. Whatever. So if you have enough, you know, pockets, deep enough pockets, and you have your phalanges of fingers into enough pots, you can just simply weather the storm, you know, and you know, it happens within like merchant guilds across everything of all time, you know, like, oh, there's a new guy in town. We're just gonna crush that dude. We're just gonna make life as absolutely miserable for that business that they can't be able to put up against us. You know, or they'll be like, "Oh, we are prestigious, and you're gonna go to this new fledgling, like who isn't even like know anything. You go to the plebeian stuff. You should get our bougie $10,000 wallet. Okay,
One day
rather to carry around your $100." Rather than carry around $10,000 in your $100 wallet and buy at this wonderful Etsy store.
One day we will sell $10,000.
You know, but
as a joke. It'll be great.
That. On the small scale, things to not touch with a 10-foot pole. Really, it's I would say it's a lot of those. It gets into the line of like where it leads to potential like insulting of like other cultures. Like I don't want to mess with that, you know. That personally, like I don't. You know, everybody has their own individual opinions on different factors and stuff, and I think the term cultural appropriation is being bastardized in the sense of like, you know, there's a lot of really good things about a lot of cultures, and you should assimilate that into your own life if it's a positive thing. And so I don't know why appropriating it is negative unless you are specifically making fun of that culture. And it's like there's so much like there's such a heavy stance on like cultural appropriation that it's like, oh, it's a negative thing, and it's like you're literally conducting segregation. Like you should be a little bit more like welcoming of those different things, as long as like it doesn't hurt anyone. You know. But that's where I don't like to touch with the 10-foot pole, because a lot of people would go, ah! Like, oh, my bad, I bought some artwork. You can't see it, but behind me is a flag that's like painted by a Taiwanese person about the Hawaiian Islands, you know. And the reason I bought it from that person who hand painted it was because I appreciated the artwork, and I thought it was gorgeous, and I enjoyed my time when I was living in Hawaii, and I wanted something to remember it. But, you know, somebody might be like, oh, you're appropriating the culture. And it's like, well, I actually, like, paid somebody because I appreciated their work. Because, you know, I thought it was awesome, and I'm helping support their livelihood. Would you rather me not do that and then starve? Like, I'm not saying that's what would have happened, but, you know, I'm just... A lot of people, like, just instantly think, like, oh, you're this, so you can't be affiliated with that. And I think it's silly.
Ooh, you know, jumping over to Amity's topics and things. That's really how she does a lot of her stuff, right? Where you kind of don't box yourself up, but enjoy what you like.
Yep. Self-expression, not compromising your style. Yes. There will always be people upset or gosh with our cancel culture, right? But hasn't happened to me yet.
Right. You're going good till it happens. So, I mean, with all that though, kind of going into the negatives and positives as someone who's trying to like avoid the pitfalls, right? Someone who doesn't want their gothic infrastructure story, blah blah blah, in a TTRPG setting ruined with the emo aesthetic, right? Again, I keep using that tonight, but that's a really easy comparison because they're so close and really what we're talking about. You know, as someone who is doing those games, it's okay to set your limits and what you allow in, right? The biggest part of cultural poisoning is what is allowed and what is permitted. Like we said, sometimes poisoning is good and changes things for the better, but other times it just destroys something that you love. It becomes something completely different or totally changed, that's not for you anymore, right? So it is important that you are able to fend off, right? Slow down the stuff that you don't want in there, right? And as someone running the game or players running the game, it is okay to set limits on things and be like, we're not doing that. That's not something we do around here. They use the word gatekeeping, and it's okay, just a little bit. You know what I mean? They use it as appropriate measure. We're not going to go into segregation. I'm looking at you, Younger, using that word 4 billion times over there. But
segregation's not necessarily negative. My bad. You've been poisoned. You've been poisoned by the media.
How dare you? But with that, being able to draw hard lines and be, I don't even want to use the word strong enough, but confident enough to have your boundaries set is just signs of a healthy environment, right? If you just let whoever come in and destroy things, it's not going to be good for people. It's not going to be a safe place. It's not going to be something fun for them. It's going to just get destroyed by, again, the poison of the culture. And making sure that you have those, what you want, what things are meant to be. We talk about this all the time in our show, setting expectations and understanding what people actually want with things, is excessively important, right? When you are quote unquote gatekeeping the people that are hopping into your games and stories, it's important to know what the people that are coming in want out of what they're doing, right? That there's clear communications of, hey, this is what we want to do, this is what we're trying to do, right? And follow through with what you said those things were, right? Because if we all expect to be playing, again, a gothic heavy setting, but all the characters have bright, colory hair and, again, do the cute, silly, emo-y stuff, it's just a different setting, a different feel that people didn't sign up for, right? There was some kind of miscommunication of what the vibe people were shooting for was. With all that being said, we're going to go with final topics or final thoughts and then jump into our handy dandy wrap up stuff. So, final thoughts. We're going to start with Younger.
Oh boy.
Keep it short, Kimo-san.
I think one of the final thoughts that I'm gonna. I was trying to think of a really good PG way of saying this without making a bunch of people mad with political jargon. And I think the easiest way to look at it is the sense of just because you did something first doesn't mean that you're gonna finish first. Like, we are talking right now on a Discord video conference. When COVID happened, the number one video conference thing that was happening before that was Zoom, right? Like that was the big guy, and for some reason, that thing got squashed by things like Microsoft Teams and other things. Even though like they had a complete adaptable functionality that could have been able to facilitate with a couple minor upgrades, but people were so set in their ways that they didn't adapt to it, and then they got steamrolled by platforms like Discord, platforms like Microsoft Teams, and other things like that. So I think it can be said that the ability to create something that is overarchingly, undeniably better than the thing that exists currently, like within that capitalist mindset, can overcome the tribulations of the megacore that's around it, especially if you have other megacores fighting wars over it.
It was very deep, very philosophical. Appreciate you, Younger. Amity!
I avoided that. I avoided the philosophical.
You hit it still. You still whacked it with a pole.
I really, I think what you said about having the confidence to sort of maintain or manage and keep it into a way that can help meet people's expectations, because when you said, what are these people looking for? What do they want out of the game? What do they want out of this experience? It's the same thing I go through. What are you looking for? What is the feeling you want out of your piece? Do we like this, etc.? But then there is at some point, whether it's a budget constraint or some sort of constraint where you do have to have that confidence to just be like, not have those external influences or people that may ruin the experience or whatever it is. So I think you hit the nail right on the head with that word confidence. To not, it's not like you're trying to minimize or shut people down, or say it's not good. It's just more like that's not what this experience is, or that's not what we're doing here or today. Let's do it tomorrow or something like that. So I was thinking about what you said there.
Before we get too far, I did have one follow-up question that just reminded me of. This is more of a again, going into the pop culture, the poisoning aspect of, like, how do you deal with your annoying mother-in-laws or mothers that step in on your stuff, right? Having external authorities mess with your thing.
Yes. Well, so honestly, most of the time, the mothers or mother-in-laws are the ones paying, which is awesome. But they're not. I mean, awesome for the person, right? But they're not always in town. But a lot of the time, I do get on conferences with both of them because we're using either their gems or their money. And to be honest, using their gems, etc., what they want to do. This generation, it's crazy. It hasn't happened that bad. I mean, a couple times people are like, no, it needs to have your grandmother's gold or your grandfather's ring in it or whatever. But the design, it hasn't been that bad versus when I was even getting married. I mean, I could not. No, you can't do that. You can't have a Halloween wedding. You can't have coffin invitations, all of those things, right? It was all like that. Right now, with the generation, at least when they're coming to me for bridal, it's been, Gen Z, they're in their early mid 20s, et cetera, that I've been dealing with. And the mothers have been surprisingly lax about the designs. However, they're not always, just supportive. But these mostly designs have been not the lightsabers or the arc reactors or things like that. Those aren't the ones that have had mothers and mother-in-laws involved.
Interesting.
But that is a tough one.
We're gonna throw that in the notes for later for further questions and future podcasts. All right. Well, we're running out of time here, so we're gonna kind of wrap it up here. I'm gonna start with where people can find you, all that fun stuff. Give them how they can get a hold of you. So if they have questions about jewelry, fun stuff, or want to check out your fantastic podcast, where's all that at?
Yes. So everything can be found on the website. So amityalexandrajewelry.com. And you can find links to the Gothic Heart there, or the Gothic Heart is on every major streaming and even some non-major streaming feeds for podcasts. Sorry. And every social media, Amity Alexandra Jewelry. And like I said, I'm in the midst of sort of a rebrand and everything. So come October 1 to take advantage of the spooky season, I'll have even items up for sale as well, like ready-made or made to order if you just want to change a metal instead of the full custom process, because I know that can be overwhelming for some people. So lots of exciting things to happen and growth. And every time I come or I've talked to Rook, I get all these new sort of inspirations and interests and what can be done, and not just in jewelry, but just in the TTRPG, which was, before I ever talked to Rook, very foreign to me.
Good, making an impact somewhere. Wow. Okay, so for our stuff, podcast code this week is the same it's been all month. We are in what? It's a new month. We have a new code. I'm sorry. It is. Sorry, I had a baby, y'all. Baby brain hitting hard still. We're in August. And so we're gonna make it a funny one because that means I need to update the code. And it's gonna be Baby Brain 907. So capital everything, Baby Brain 907. That'll get you 10% off at the website. All that fun stuff. Thank you. If you can see that in the corner of the chat here. We will post everything on the notes as we usually do. Other things to check out tomorrow. We'll be in Esther Park doing an event, doing Esther Fest. We'll be there all day from like 2 to 10. So come by, play games, hang out with us, buy all the dice and the things. Wahaha. What else we got? We should be back on schedule with D&D and Avatar coming up. It's looking like D&D's last session is coming shortly. Next session's probably the last one, unless we do some craziness like final fight epilogue last session. So if you've missed all that, there's hours and hours of stuff to watch. Avatar is also only a couple sessions away, so we'll be getting new stuff. So we'll be voting on what we want to learn and teach shortly. It's looking like Star Wars, Star Trek, and Power Rangers are on the list finally. Wahaha! Youngers over there cringing. Don't mind me. Um. Anyway, that's all I got. Younger, you think anything I missed?
Nothing besides just saying thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's been a blast.
Thank you guys for having me. And I got to be a solo guest. I just feel so special.
Right? Flash the scene there. All right. Well, with adventure in mind, have a wonderful time. Bye.